Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on the UCP caucus booting a rural backbencher. But first, from candidate to campaign mode.
Donald Trump thinks he can weaken us with his plan to divide and conquer. Pierre Poilievre's plan will leave us divided and ready to be conquered.
Mark Carney in his victory speech Sunday set to take over from Justin Trudeau after capturing Liberal leadership in a landslide, nearly 86% of the vote. The next closest candidate, former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland at 8%. Joining us now to pick up the discussion, Sabrina Grover, a Liberal strategist, former Liberal candidate in Calgary-Centre. Sabrina, good to see you. Welcome back.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, let's maybe first touch on the outcome. 86% support. What does that reflect to you, and what's it say about the mandate Mark Carney now has as Liberal leader?
I think it was really fascinating to see that level of support on a first round ballot with a pretty solid second contender in Chrystia Freeland that I think we would have thought had we had this conversation back at the beginning of January. And so I think it gives Mr. Carney a really, really solid mandate. And one of the things I've heard anecdotally about Mr. Carney's campaign and about the people that were attending that campaign is a lot of folks have said that when they looked around the room, they didn't know anyone in the room. And that's important because it means that there were a lot of brand new people drawn to this party that took out memberships and came to his events. That's a strong mandate, not only just from registered Liberals, which we know many of them would have re-registered and voted in this race, but also from Canadians, because I think this gives us a general idea of new Canadians, new sampling of Canadians who may have become interested in the campaign and voted for Carney.
Okay, so how challenged then will he be to deliver on what he's suggesting will be a quick and seamless transition, especially as Canada continues to face down the uncertainty and chaos of a Trump tariffs trade war, which today escalated, apparent doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum in response to Ontario's electricity surcharge?
Yeah, I think certainly, number one, I would say his first step is to establish a relationship immediately with premiers and territorial leaders across the country. They are on the front lines of having to deal with some of these economic impacts because of the industries that are affected, namely energy, agriculture, electricity. So I think that was something that he already indicated he would do. I think it's important that he's keeping Don LeBlanc and Melanie Joly in their roles because they have been really important in communicating with the United States and not increasing, keeping predictability in those roles, I think is important, especially as you think about heading into a national election in the next couple of weeks. The last piece I'd say is it's interesting that he's pulled a chief of staff from the MP cohort. Again, I think that keeps a little bit of predictability and sustainability. Marco has obviously been in the House for the last number of years and has been in the House over the last couple of weeks as the U.S. piece has unfolded. So I think that potentially offers some sustainability.
How long does Mark Carney wait before triggering an election? Could it come as quickly as the next couple of weeks, as some have already suggested?
I do think you're likely to see something come in the next couple of weeks. Number one, obviously the momentum of the Liberal Party is strong and the mobilization of grassroots volunteers is huge, right? When you're heading into an election period, the number one thing you need is volunteers. And the fact that this party has been able to mobilize so many people in a leadership really bodes well for a field game in an election. And the last piece is that you really want to be able to cut off the Conservatives on their spending. The quicker you can move into an election, the quicker you can cut off ad spending and constrain it to the red period.
Okay, we all know he's not a career politician, so how does he differentiate himself from the campaign firepower of a Pierre Poilievre?
I think that what people are looking for right now is really different than what people might have been looking for in September 2024 if an election was called. The unpredictability, the daily chaos, the mania of Donald Trump needs to be met with a steady, calm, rational hand. And I think that's what you're getting in Mark Carney. On the other hand, we've seen Pierre continue to delve in these toxic, kind of annoying tropes where he's talking about carbon tax Carney, continues to be negative, really hasn't come around to this idea that he is Canada first. It's almost unbelievable if you're a voter that he's in it for Canada or that he's going to stand up for Canada, except for that he says it a bunch of times. And so I think that is actually going to come through really clearly in a campaign. And I think that what people are going to be looking for is that steady hand and that steady approach, especially when you're going to see Donald Trump on your screens every day.
There's continued reference to Mark Carney's Alberta roots, but what do you see Mark Carney actually having to offer to Albertans that would sway any degree of support out here in the West?
Well, it's really interesting when you actually dig into the results of the leadership race. It was fascinating to see even, strongholds in Calgary that are conservative. Over 1,000 people in that riding came out to vote for the leadership candidates, most of that vote going to Mark Carney. Alberta actually had the third highest number of respondents in the leadership race. So, I think that obviously there's, this is not something to say that we're going to switch over the conservative stronghold in the province, but I think he does offer some stability, specifically for Albertans who are looking for more information on the energy sector. And his approach to reducing or to canceling the carbon tax, I think, is also going to be a big appeal here. He does have a bit of that centrist, edge to him that I think does appeal to Albertans broadly. And so we'll see how that plays out in a election in key ridings. I don't think it's going to change the whole province, but there are some ridings that certainly could be at play.
And with that in mind, how would you rate the possibility of Mark Carney actually running in an Edmonton riding?
I'd rate it pretty low. I think it's more likely that you'll see him run in Ontario, though his roots are in Alberta. I think he's really built his business and his political and public service legacy in Ontario, and I think that's likely where you're going to see him run.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate getting your perspective this evening, Sabrina. Thank you kindly.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Sabrina Grover is a Liberal strategist and a former Liberal candidate in Calgary-Centre.